All right, welcome everybody to the North Andover Board of Finance Committee hearing. The date is, did I say it wrong? No. Okay, November 12th, 2024. I see that we do have a quorum, so I'll call this meeting to order at 7:05. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I'd just like to take 1 minute and just mention the passing of our friend and colleague Ken Gray. He recently passed away unexpectedly and too soon. He was a friend and a colleague to all of us. He's going to be missed by all of us, by the community, and but certainly none more so than his family. So with that in mind, I'd like to just, take a couple seconds here and just reflect on our time with Kent here in the committee. So. Okay, thanks. Okay, public comment. I see we don't have any public comment tonight. So the first order of business is the election of the chair and vice chair. So I guess for the chair, do we have any nominations?
I will make a motion that we nominate Donovan to continue as the chair.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. Well, thank you. I will accept that nomination, I guess, and we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Nope, that's okay. I'm happy to do it. For vice chair, do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I will move that we nominate Chris to continue as vice chair.
All right, I would second that. So all those in favor of Chris continuing to serve as vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Chris, welcome back. The dynamic duo. All right. So seeing as I have retained my seat, I will now go and use my discretion, assuming there's no objections, to move an update on our schools by Pam Lathrop, our interim superintendent, to the next item on our agenda. No objections, okay. So Pam, if you want to step up, and I'll just sort of set the table a little bit. I don't think we need to go over everything that's happened just before town meeting since, but let me just give a brief update as to where we are right now. So the town manager sent out an update on October 24th. I think everybody should have been in receipt of it, both from her and then again from me. In her memo, she reported that as of October 14th, the district's current deficit is $451,877.76. We anticipate a potential shortfall, she noted, of 2.5 to 3.5 million for the fiscal year, when projected unencumbered expenses and salary costs are factored in. She goes on to say in her memo that while various factors have contributed to the current deficit, it is important to acknowledge the operational realities that have led to the situation. Although we have eliminated some unbudgeted teaching assistants, positions, and other roles, the adjustments alone were not sufficient. Accurate forecasting remains a challenge due to past inconsistencies in financial tracking and the absence of contracts and guidelines essential for financial planning. And she concludes by saying that moving forward, we are implementing an enhanced tracking procedure, stricter financial oversight, and a commitment to operational efficiency. So I'm hoping, Pam, that you could expand on that a little bit or just fill us in. I just thought that's the sort of most up-to-date information that we've been provided with. So thank you for joining us. It's lovely to have you. I want to start off by saying thank you for all of the work you've been doing over the course of the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months, especially. I mean, clearly you were doing a lot of hard work before that, but in that time you have stepped up, and thank you for doing that. So The floor is yours.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.
So I just passed out, again, the same budget memo that you received, and then I also attached to it sort of the two updates that I always give to the school committee, so I just thought it might be helpful for you to have that as well.
Thank you.
So the first one is just our budget update as of 10/24, and then the second sheet that you received is the budget status report every time I have reported to the school committee. And so I'll start by saying I think one of the things that's been challenging, or I don't want to say the word misleading, but could be confusing, is that we were giving budget updates every school committee meeting. And those budget updates were coming before we'd had our first payroll, before we had received our first billings cycles. And so it looked better than the forecast that we see right now. So if you look at the last page, you'll see how we went from having, in July, we started with 62 million, and my first report was we had still had a budget balance of 55 million. And that remained pretty stable, sort of moving forward until we hit September, when we had our first payroll. And then we were still had a budget remaining of 4 million, and that continued. But as you heard, the last budget update, we are now projecting deficit from where we are. So that came about because of just what I said, because we had not encumbered all of our salaries yet. We also had an error on our part, which we recognized and were able to correct, that we had 7 salaries that were encumbered incorrectly, that we had to fix that problem. And we also have accurate billing. We've gone through our first billing cycle, so we know what transportation costs are looking like. We know what our out of district tuition are looking like. So on the second page, what you have is that, yes, we're running about, right now it's 451 as of 10/24, but we also listed for you the things that we have not encumbered into this budget yet, so things that we anticipate spending. And then because of those, we've been really fortunate, and I know Dennis is here tonight, been really fortunate to work with our town manager and with Dennis and Kyle from the town. And, the good news is our numbers are matching. The bad news are the numbers are what the numbers are. But so that shows you the non-encumbered salaries and expenses, and then it does show you a little bit of funding sources that we have. So there's about $1.8 million to offset where we believe, but right now we do believe we're looking like, if we continue on the path we're on, about a $2.5 million to $3.5 million deficit at the end of the school year. And as town manager shared with you in her report, largely this is due to the fact that we are basically running pretty much the same as we had run in the past. We did we did through the voluntary separation program, we were able to account for those extra teaching assistants that weren't accounted for, but that wasn't really a savings. That was just being able to handle that situation. There were a few positions that we didn't bring back, but if you've read the CLA report, you also know that it's been difficult to get some historical data and a sense of what the spending looks like. The good news is we've been able to work on that for this year. So our goal, and one of my own superintendent's goals, if you were watching the school committee, is to come in with a balanced FY26 budget and to be come in at 0 for FY26. That's our goal right now. I have met with the principal leadership team, and we are looking at ways that we might be able to reduce the budget currently. And I'll meet again with the entire leadership team this week, and we will continue to build upon that list and bring that forth to the school committee. I mean, it's tricky, things that we're looking at. What could we potentially cut? What would be the impact of that cut? And what would be the dollar amount? And whether or not the dollar amount savings really outweighs the impact of the cut. Because when you're already in the middle of a school year, if you start looking at things like class sizes and reductions there, the impact could be much larger than what our savings are in lots of ways. But there may be some things that we can, and we certainly will do that. We have I've said soft freeze, but I think the principals would tell you it's a pretty hard freeze on our budget right now. So we're spending on essential items to keep the schools running, and on our curriculum items, but we are not spending on extras. We are all utilizing Munis. We've worked well with the town in order to, if there are features of Munis that we weren't using in the past. Some of the areas that continue to be tricky for us are extra hours. So that means that hours that we may have to bring somebody in to help support students either before or after school, and continuing substitute costs. I'm happy to answer questions if that's helpful, or
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, just, do you feel like you've, how do I put it, uncovered all the surprises? I mean, do you feel like you've revealed everything, or are you still facing trepidation that something else is going to, how comfortable are you now? Even though you're,
Yeah.
you know.
I feel like that we know what we're spending, what kind of money we need to spend on our education, or what money that we're committing to education.
Yeah.
I think that we still have areas that could be a surprise to us if a student moves in, or if
Yeah,
there is
special needs is
right, or if there
always
is an
an issue, sure.
unanticipated cost in a different
Yeah.
way, or if there was an unanticipated cost to something.
Right.
But you know, our interim special ed director, Lynn O'Neill, has been working very carefully, has looked at all of the situations that we may have had for out of district, keeping very diligent spreadsheets. We now have our principals, if they're using extra hours to support special education students, those hours are sent to Lynn O'Neill. Lynn O'Neill approves them before they go to payroll. They have to be approved. So we have some checks and balances that
Yeah.
we've put in place so that it's not to say that the principals weren't doing a great job. They're doing a wonderful job. They were asked to manage many, many, many things. But so now we have checks and balances in place for that. We also, one of the other things that we didn't realize was that we had some areas that we had to correct in terms of procurement and with contracts. So we have spent this year getting contracts for all of the people that we work with. We didn't have contracts, so that's been challenging. And knowing, if in absence of them, what happens is that sometimes people commit money or spend money that they don't have. And so we have Tracy, Michaela, and I'll probably say that wrong, our supervisor of accounts. She has gone through the procurement course this year, which is really helpful. Another challenge is we're continuing to work without a finance director. We have been so supported by the town. I cannot thank them enough, and they come, here whenever we need them. But that's a challenge.
Yeah.
How does that search?
Not well. We've had some great people that have applied for the position, but it is challenging. We opened that position up after the school year had started, so it's really hard to get a person to leave a position at that time.
Sure.
And so then some of the people that have applied haven't quite had all of the expertise that we're looking for in order to get us to where we need. The people in this office are working very, very hard, and the town has supported us 100%. We are now looking, which we were before, but we're looking harder at perhaps trying to bring an interim or somebody who's retired. So if you're a retired school finance director and you're looking for a position and watching this now, we'd love to hear from you.
We have a huge retired school finance directors flock to our.
They flock.
Yeah,
Yes.
they flock to the North Andover Town Finance Committee meetings. So
Yeah.
I have no doubt that you saying
It's
that
gonna
will
pour
get the
in
publicity
tonight.
you needed. Yeah.
But to answer your question, how sure are we? I feel confident that we know what it costs to run this district. I feel confident that we can present the school committee with a budget of what it costs to run this district. That we have gotten a handle on the things that we may have been doing that were covered by something else, or I'm not quite sure, but I feel very confident in that. I feel confident in our salaries that we have a correct sense of
Looked under everything, yeah.
Of where we're going.
Yeah.
I think the challenging part will be that the reality is we're spending more than what we have, and the trends will show you that, right? So if you look back a few years, you're going to see that every year we've been spending $2 to $3 to $4 to $5 million over where we need to be. COVID didn't help anybody and it didn't, right? There was relief money, but that relief money sort of got us into some of the problems we were in. But if we continue all of the positions and the practices in place, our budget is going to come in larger, and so, you know, that's something that the school committee will have to wrestle with. I mean, I certainly will make recommendations to them about areas, and with input from our leaders and from our staff, because it's not that, there are things that we are providing everything that our teachers need in order to deliver the curriculum that we have set forth, but there are some things that they don't have that they would like to have, like
Yep.
the computer. So we went to a 2-to-1 computer program in the elementary school, and I think some elementary teachers and students and families might tell you that they don't, this has been challenging
Yeah.
a little bit to be there.
Yeah. I still hope that, and I know that you will do this, present a budget that you think this is what we need. Even though it's like, is the money there? On the school committee, I always felt that that was really important. What do we need
Right.
to run the schools?
Right.
What is that number?
Right.
And it might be like, we can't get there, or how do we get there?
Yeah.
Or we can get there if we do this.
Yeah.
But at least we know what that is.
Yeah, I think the school committee needs to see a budget of this is what level services really truly
Right,
looks like, and this is what it
exactly.
costs. These are some other things that we feel like our district might need. This is what this costs.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
and so they have some opportunities to make some decisions and make a plan.
At least things that are real. I mean, it's this, like, this is what's real.
Correct.
This is what our level service budget is, you know, so, which never is enough.
Right.
But
But we
good.
also are looking at, you know, I think you probably have heard from CPAC, and there are some concerns that CPAC has brought forward, the Special
Sure.
Education Parent Advisory Council. So some of the things we're looking at this year is looking at all of our programming. We do have someone that's supporting in that work. I know it sounds tricky sometimes to spend money, but sometimes you have to spend money to save money. And so we are looking at our programming because we want to make sure that we are offering as many district programs as we can, so our students can stay in district for the programs that are here,
Yep. Hey,
and
listen,
for the
when we-
education that they need.
When we went into full-time kindergarten, you know, that's cost a lot to save in the long run.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
I mean, we do have a few things in place, so we did raise preschool tuition this year. We did, we didn't raise the user fees for facilities, but we did raise the fees of custodians. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but in the past, it was a flat rate for custodians. So the minute that we actually rented out, we started losing money.
yeah,
So now, we're charged at a rate so that it pays for the custodial
Yeah.
fee.
okay.
Go ahead, Keith.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. You mentioned operational efficiencies. Can you suss that out a bit more? Can you tell us a little bit more what you folks are doing operationally?
So operationally, we are committed to using the Munis system. All of our principals are logging in, looking at their POs through Munis. We're using it here. We've met with the town, with the payroll person, Dawn from town, Kyle, the town accountant, to help us if there are some areas that we weren't using correctly. And some of it was maybe controls that we needed to have open up and use that way. I have asked all principals to sign off on extra hours or use of a substitute. So sometimes in the past, not that wasn't happening, but there was just a form that was passed in to secretaries, so now they're reviewing it, which they always reviewed it, but now it's just very clear that it's been reviewed. Operationally, we've tried to separate extra hours that you may need from in the school outside of special education extra hours, so we have a sense of how much money we really need in order to support special education, so we have an appropriate number as well as general education. Again, we have a freeze on our budget, so principals are not and directors aren't allowed to just, they have to ask permission. You know, they tell me what they're trying to use their budget money for. We make some determinations if it makes sense, and whether or not we'll approve it. I've denied all purchase orders that don't come in with a contract under the procurement laws, and so we're really working hard on understanding, and that's had a few growing pains with some of our departments, but we're getting there. Within our school office, so Greg Landry was the Director of Human Resources. He's now the Director of Personnel and Operations because the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations did finance in both operations. with absence of that position, and what we had decided was we really just needed a pure finance director at this point and take that off their plate. So we've changed Greg's job description so that he is handling operations within the school district. So he works with John Mullen, our director of custodians, and with Steve Foster and Jeremy Brandt at the town facilities area as well. We have internally, we have tried to not fill positions if they opened up. So when I took this position as acting and then interim, I moved Kristen Ando into interim assistant superintendent. She was the humanities director. We decided to go unfilled. So in many ways, there are more people are doing more jobs. Yes. Trying to think. And I do think that although it was part of the MOA, it's really good practice that we meet regularly with the town and review. We have one of our operational meetings tomorrow. I think operationally also have been at so instead of at every school committee meeting now giving a budget update, we give a budget update after a payroll, because it's really that's when you have a little bit more exact numbers. So we have budget updates, so it's very transparent about what's happening, and so the school committee's aware of where the finances are.
Can I also, so there's always a silver lining in everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think this might be an opportunity, a mere suggestion, to make it part of your operation where you've developed the committee internally with some of the folks that have boots on the ground, that know some savings just based on their daily operation and their work. They know, hey, if we did this differently, this might help to create some savings. So really one way of saying maybe it might be in the spirit of saving money and addressing the budget shortfall to create a committee internally with folks from the very base entry folks all the way up to yourself that may meet monthly and maybe have a competition about how we can save money. There's also, and I don't know if this is a result of some of these discussions, but now I see sponsorships at the athletic fields. That's a way to monetize some of the inherent value of state government, where private businesses will pay money to put their logo up on the around the perimeter of the field. That same thing can happen with buses, where you can have sponsorship on the buses where private companies, there's already a structure and framework in place for the Mass Highway Department, where they'll do sponsorships or adopt a highway, where folks will pay money to kind of reduce the load on municipalities or state governments. Also, even on uniforms. I mean, it's difficult in good times. People have like a tolerance for these things, but maybe this might be the time where the football team has, much like the Patriots will have a logo from a local company, thus reducing the cost internally. And the last thing that I would suggest is, I'm sure we know that other school departments and towns are facing this. Maybe there's an opportunity to create it may exist already, but to create some center of excellences where North Andover might have a really good approach, but we found that Bridgewater has some things that we may not have thought of. So maybe this might be our opportunity to meet and to discuss this statewide and maybe create a committee of, how to address budget shortfalls.
Yeah, I can address a couple of those things. So maybe just to share internally, I have a leadership team. That's the internal team of central office. We meet every Friday to do a lot of the things that you talked about. Then we have 3 other kinds of leadership teams in the district. I have what I call a principal arc, and so that really is about curriculum and education. So we meet regularly with them. We have a principal in central office meeting. We meet regularly, and that's to do more of the operational pieces, the nuts and bolts. So that's when we met last time, where each group went off. So the elementary, the middle and high school, central office went off and worked about what cuts could we make now, and when we had those 3 charts, what would be the cut, what would be the impact, and what would be the dollar amount. And then I have a larger leadership team that includes all of the directors, assistant principals in the district, and they'll continue that work. We meet with them regularly, so they'll continue that work looking at that chart. So that's in place. The other is each principal was asked to reduce their school budget by 10%. it's a little bit trickier when you're in elementary school and it's a smaller area, but sort of the best example of that would probably be our middle school. So Deb Pullman, who's the interim principal at North Andover High School, she met with all of her department chairs, did exactly what you said. What can we reduce? They started with 10%, now they're at 15%, continually going back to that department and scaling down. So we have some of that. We certainly can broaden that out.
If we could, because the distinction I'm making is not, I don't want to, the cuts I know you guys are doing,
Yeah.
but how can we bring in funds or bring in money without impacting the operations?
Correct.
And that's whether it's wrapping the school buses
Yeah.
in a local company that will pay for gas or will
Right.
pay for maintenance. And if you could just, the next time we meet, if we could have a conversation about, I'd like to have us start thinking about in those creative
Right.
ways.
So those creative ways take a little bit more than me. Those would be policies that the committee, that the school committee would choose to have. I think that we have some of those signage, but that with signage comes lots of other things, and lots of school districts have explored that and continue. But that would be a conversation to have with the school board. And whether or not we think that's, I mean, I certainly can make recommendations to them. And then in terms of the school buses, we don't own the school buses. We contract with someone for that, but that would be sort of their area. In terms of the community, like the statewide, yes, we're not the only group in this problem. I meet with the Merrimack Valley Association Superintendents Group once a month. This is often part of a topic of conversation and trying to share best practices. John Massaro is a retired superintendent from, I think he was in Everett last, but his mostly was in Stoneham. He's my coach from Massachusetts School Association of School Superintendents. When I asked them to match me with someone, I asked for someone who had a stronger sense of finance, and so he has a strong finance background, so I meet with him. So to try to get some other areas and what we're looking at. But yes, I think it's a great idea, and we'll continue to reach out to the Commonwealth and to other people. I've just been asked to join a group called Lead Now. It's a national superintendent group, which gives you an opportunity to connect nationally, to hear a little bit more and try to bring in some different perspectives. Welcome.
Thanks, Nancy?
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Sure.
Thanks for being here.
Sure.
First of all, I know you don't have an easy job.
None of us do.
I just have a few questions about the numbers themselves.
Yeah.
So, the loss of $2.5 to $3.5 million, what's driving the fact that there's a $1 million spread there? Is it 2.5 or 3.5? What's the unknown there that's giving it such a big range?
The unknown there are out of district tuition costs, whether or not we have some, sometimes we have some students that may need to be out district, or if we have a new student moving to town. Currently, we don't run with any kind of reserve, so we just run with what we have. And so if you have something that's unanticipated, we are continuing to look at transportation. Transportation costs can vary. Last year, we had an unprecedented year of students that we were transporting that were unhomed or required services outside, maybe temporarily placement outside of North Andover, and we're responsible for transportation. And then the other large piece is overtime.
Mm-hmm.
So custodial overtime, teaching assistant, what we call extra hours. Still trying to get a handle on that. Our custodial team is not a full team, so we do run on overtime.
Okay, so instead of paying regular costs, you're paying extra to the people that are working extra instead of just base time.
Correct. One of the areas that's been tricky that we're getting a better handle on, and I think this sort of goes to your question about what we know for next year, is, so there's two things. One is long-term substitutes. So now we have a better sense of who may need to go out for some time during the year, so that we can plan for what a long-term substitute would be, because that wasn't something that we often had planned for. And I already forgot what the second one was. It'll come to me in a minute.
Okay, and I have a couple of other questions. So, the thing with the I think it was 9 employees with a $630,000 issue. I guess I don't understand how that creates a delta to budget. I mean, if that happened around the September time frame, the budget was already done. So I understand that maybe there was something that happened, but why would that be a difference to budget?
They weren't encumbered. We didn't encumber the money.
Back at budget time, when the budget was created?
The ones the employees that we keyed in incorrectly?
Yeah, why would that, were they correct in the budget, I guess is my question. If they were correct in the budget and now it's been corrected for real, I don't understand why that's.
The budget's, I don't believe the budget was correct. I mean, I just to be as honest as I can be, we rolled forward with an FY25 budget, but those numbers were based, I mean, I didn't get to correct the FY25
Okay.
budget. We tried our best to
Okay.
move some numbers around, but not knowing what some of the costs were, it was challenging to fix that. And we went through the voluntary separation program, so it was successful, but it was also, we didn't have the new people hired yet to know what that would look like, so.
Okay, so the error was kind of in the budget as well, it sounds like, for those people.
Say it again.
The error was in the budget as well for those particular people?
There's the errors in the budget in general. That's why it's not gonna, that's why there's gonna be $2.5 to $3.5 million. So, you know,
Okay.
we could have spent, $100,000 on something last year, but it was budgeted for $800,000 this year. So we already started off $200,000 in the negative.
And then my other question is it looks like, this is a nice summary, because when I read the original memo, what I was kind of looking for in my mind is what line items, what are the deltas per line item? So the special education is $1 million of it looks like. And does the state not pitch anything for that, or will that not affect till the following year?
That's special
impact their-
education salaries, so the top line is expenses and the bottom is salaries, and we do receive state aid, but we'll still be over what we receive for state aid. And then remember, we took our Chapter 70 money came in higher than we anticipated. Was there a circuit breaker, sorry. Circuit breaker came in higher than we anticipated, but we did take the extraordinary effort money last year, so that's sort of already off the table, a little bit of that, but it did come in higher than we had anticipated.
But in a case like this, where something is kind of discovered partway into the school year, there's no mechanism to go back to the state and ask for more money?
Not that I know of.
Not really.
Okay.
What I was gonna say before was the other piece that makes it tricky is that we don't always know when a teacher is going to move lanes, move from like a master's to move to the next lane. So they are certain amounts of times in the year that they can apply to do that, but there isn't anything that gives us a forewarning that it's coming. So we have met with union leadership. They're not opposed to us putting out a survey to staff saying, if you think that you're going to be moving, would you like indicate to us so that we can plan appropriately for that?
So that's interesting. So you could have 13 folks who are taking classes to move up into a band, but you had no idea. Oh, okay. I like the idea of a survey, yeah.
Right, it's voluntary because it's not something
Right.
they have to, but I don't think that people would be opposed to telling us
I
that.
wouldn't think so, but that could be you could see that being a huge impact on the budget if they're taking classes and then, you get 25 of them and you have no idea. Okay, thanks. Nancy, any more?
Yeah, I don't quite understand the Medicaid thing, but maybe that's more of a question for Melissa.
Medicaid is money that we bring in there's certain people can count their hours and we get reimbursed through Medicaid.
Okay.
All the Medicaid money goes to the town. It used to be when it first started, you would do the work, the Medicaid money would come to the school. Now it goes to the town. And so then the town,
Can allocate
and Dennis,
all.
you can jump in if I'm getting this wrong, then they allocate what comes back to us. So the town manager and has agreed to allocate more than what we had anticipated receiving, but that will be pending a vote at town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I was just gonna ask, what is the $750K that the town would be?
Medicaid.
That's what that $750K is the Medicaid and the Amazon combined? Or the $750,000 that says town funding pending vote of approval of select board, like what is that money?
Dennis,
Sorry.
come on up. Dennis, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Good evening, Dennis Cohen, Town Finance Director.
My best friend.
Oh, great to meet you. I had not met you since,
The new Lynn?
yeah, the new Lynn. Wonderful.
The $750,000 is ARPA funding, so that's directed by the select board, so, yeah. Thank you.
I only had one other question, really, I think everything else has been asked, but, under not encumbered, I understand like subs and OT, because you don't know what those are, but what is this additional salaries? Like, what is an additional salary that you wouldn't know
Additional
about?
salary could be any position that we haven't filled yet, that still may be an open fit position, as in finance director, but we do have so that money we don't encumber because we don't have a person in the position yet.
Oh, so it really could be a worse story once I think, how many open
Well,
positions do we have?
Not a lot, but we factored that into the 2.5, 3.5 million.
Oh, you did, okay. Oh, okay,
Bless you.
so these unencumbered items are,
They go to the red, to the
Okay.
to the 2.5 million,
Got it,
3.5 million.
got it.
The negative
That's the thing that
451
makes
is where
up
we
the-
are currently.
Okay. Right, okay.
I'm sorry, can I ask? Of course you can. So I don't quite understand that. Why is that, again, I'm trying to understand why that's a delta to budget. I mean, there must have been a finance director budget. I understand it's maybe not encumbered because you don't have an actual person, but it must be in the budget. So I don't understand how it's
Yes,
contributing to a
good
delta
question.
to budget.
It is in the budget, but we haven't hired a person, so that money we haven't negotiated yes, there's a salary amount there.
Mm.
I mean, additional salaries could also be if a new student enters our district that we have to hire a teaching assistant for, or if there was some other kinds of situation where we had to add an additional salary.
If I could elaborate.
Yes,
It-
please.
It isn't the budget. The budget is what the budget is. It was voted. So when we're looking at what's available, what the sheet is trying to do is say, this is what we've expended, this is what we've encumbered, this is what's gonna be left over at the end, or what the deficit there will be. The positions or the items that we don't know about, those haven't been encumbered yet, so essentially, if you were gonna add to the encumbrance, it would create the whole a deeper, larger deficit.
Okay.
So because certain positions aren't hired yet, the way the system works, you encumber the salary of an individual person. There's some other ways to do it, but in any case, certain salaries haven't been encumbered yet, so it'll show up, the budget is what the budget is, the expenditures are what the expenditures are. The piece of it that fluctuates is what's encumbered, what's projected to be spent for the rest of the year, which would create the variance on the deficit.
Yeah, I just think it's a little confusing the way it's presented, because I think what would be helpful would be to know what are the differences to budget, not necessarily what's encumbered versus unencumbered. Like, just to give that example, finance director, if that's in the budget, it's not really contributing to a difference to the budget. Maybe it's just the way it's presented, I find it a little confusing.
Potentially, right. And so I think what the big picture item is the budget wasn't, the approved budget wasn't enough to satisfy what had been committed to be spent this year. And so whether or not you talk about encumbered or expected to be, essentially if you look at encumbered being anticipated expenditures, through the end of the year, so we're projecting where we're gonna be. So if you say it's expenditures, and instead of calling it encumbrances, we could change that, call it, anticipated expenditures to give you estimated for the end of the year, and it's gonna give you the same thing. We're using encumbrances here because that's the way the system works and that's the way we monitor it, so,
Okay.
we encumber everyone's salaries to make sure that, or to try to make sure that we're not gonna go over on any line item, or at least we know in advance, and so we can move budgets accordingly, or reallocate budgets accordingly. That's the way it should work. In this case, obviously, there's a lot of deficits in a lot of spots, so identifying where budgets would be moved from at this point is a little bit more challenging than it would be normally.
Okay, got it.
I think, Nancy, part of the nomenclature issue is that none of this was in Munis before, right? And now it is, so they're using the Munis nomenclatures, right? A little bit,
So it's
maybe too simplified?
maybe a little bit too simplified. I mean, Munis has been used by the school and the town for a number of years.
By the town.
By the school as well, but they may have, there have been areas that they probably weren't fully utilizing the efficiencies or using it the way it was intended to.
Okay.
But it has been used. I mean,
Very diplomatic.
But can I just add I understand where you're coming from, because I felt this way back in June or whenever the whole issue was happening with the 4 million, because I was like, well, why, there are salaries that have a zero budget, like, for me though, we budgeted for the finance director, but that budget got consumed by these other things that we didn't necessarily plan for, which is, those things are in the encumbered number. So now there's no budget left for what we did originally budget for, i.e. the finance director in this case, right? I mean, does that help?
Yeah, I just
Think
feel
about
like, quite honestly, I feel like it's, and, you know, I come from a corporate background, so it's a little different. I feel like it's a middle misleading to call out something like the finance director as a delta when it's really not. It's just the way, I understand how you got to your number. It's all these encumbrances and then all these other things, but that's not really a difference to budgets. I just feel like it would be a little clearer going forward, maybe to present, here are all the line items compared, this is what we expect to spend and versus the budget, very simple. Not whether it's encumbered, unencumbered, just I'm gonna expend, you know, this on this line item, and I only had budgeted for this line item.
Right.
It's just a little simpler.
We have more detail, information like that. It's hard, I shared with you what I shared with the school committee, because that could be a very cumbersome report. And I think that is the hard, what you just said really sort of is it, because that's what's been challenging. It's been challenging for the school committee too, because they think about, well, this is what we budgeted, so why are we spending more than what we budgeted? And just as Dennis said, unfortunately, the numbers weren't matching what our needs were.
Yeah, okay.
And really, yeah. I was gonna say, no, really just one other column would be added to this. Essentially, if you added the year-to-date plus the encumbrance,
Yeah,
that's what you're looking for. So I agree with the presentation. That's the way I personally would present it, but, because that's the one piece that's missing. It's essentially the total column. You know,
Yeah.
the titles of the top part of it, you can argue with, whether you call it encumbrance or estimated remaining. The one piece that's missing here is the total, which would then, that last column is really what's saying, this is what your budget is, this is what we expect to spend, and that's what the change is.
yeah, it might be something to think about going forward, that's all.
Yep.
Anybody else, any additional questions? No? No? All right, thank you. Thank you,
welcome.
Dennis,
Thank
thank
you.
you for hopping
Thank
up and coming. Pam, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah.
It has been very much appreciated, I think, not just by us, but a lot of other people really notice and
Thank you.
it's made a big
Everybody's
impact.
working really hard. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that people are working, and somebody mentioned a silver lining at some point, I think
Yeah,
maybe you did,
she-
or you did. And it is hard to see where the silver lining might be, and I think we sort of all came to the realization that we will do the very best that we can. We will continue to look
Yeah.
for cuts and make appropriate decisions this year, but we really, FY '26, we need to have a really good picture so that we're going into town meeting and presenting to you what FY '26 should look like, and
Yeah.
so, you know, we
The
can't continue
transparency
this.
is really obvious too. I mean, it's a big difference in what's come through. So, gives us a lot of faith.
Well, I agree, I think that is important, and I appreciate your transparency, and I would just, you know, I don't think you need this encouragement, but I would do it anyways. I would encourage you to keep being as transparent to us and the school committee as much as possible. That way we can all just be on the same page.
Yeah.
I
Got a lot of
think,
support here.
yeah, I think
you. We
you've
appreciate
done a
it.
great job with that. And I have no doubt that you will continue in that, but I just say for the record, you know, we like transparency. So as much as you can give us is great,
Great,
okay?
thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
If I can say, if there is another issue, like it's gonna get bigger, let us know sooner.
Yeah.
Well, you'll get your budget update every month.
Every
and so
month now, right.
unfortunately, I don't want to say that, like, I think it's going to get better right away. I mean, I do think that, you know, one of the things we didn't mention is we have federal grants that are just starting to come in, and we're applying for grants, and so there will be some offsets when that happens, but largely that's already committed for, and with federal grants comes a lot of conditions. But, you know, I think that's what's challenging, is that each week it gets a little bit harder to look at, but we'll do the best we
I heard
can.
that Keith's company is looking to sponsor
Keith wants to wrap it up.
the building of the
Keith's
Kittredge.
boss.
Right.
I'm all for it.
All right. On that note, thank you, Pam. All right, thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is, excuse me, is a selection of members for the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee. So just to get everybody on the same page, the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee advises the town manager on revenue, other financial services, and fixed cost projections for the town operating budgets. Once the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee identifies where the revenues are and where the fixed costs are. The town manager can then put together a budget and present it to us and the select board. And then the school committee can get to work on their side of it. So it's a very important part. Nancy has generously served on it the last 2 years. We appreciate that. We do have an opening, so I should say, it requires 2 members from the finance committee to participate in that. Ken did serve in that capacity as well, so we'll have to replace Ken. So first of all, Nancy, are you willing to continue to stay on?
Sure.
Okay. Is there any other volunteers for the other seat?
Do you want me to explain what's involved? Would that help at all?
Uh,
Or people know?
Well, I think it's going to fall to me, and I've
Okay,
been, and I've
okay.
done it before
Okay,
too.
alright,
So
okay.
I think we're going to be okay with that. So I will do the other seat. We have a meeting, and Dennis from the audience can correct me if I'm wrong. The first meeting is Thursday at 9 a.m. in Town Hall, in the second floor conference room. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, Nancy, you got that?
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you there. All right, well, there we go on that. Yeah, I think the only other thing we have is to mention that our next meeting is Wednesday, December 18th. Actually, I don't normally like to do this, Dennis, so don't think I'm going to do this every time. But now that you're here, what is a tri-board meeting? Do you remember off the top of your head or no?
The tri-board meeting?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the third board would be.
Finance, Select, and School.
Okay, yep.
Do you know when it is though?
I don't know when it
No,
is.
okay, that's fine. No, not a big deal. I was calling you out at random, so not a problem. Fair enough. All right, so we'll get that to everybody too, because I think that comes in December as well.
Lathrop thought it was the 13th, but I don't know.
I don't think it's on a Friday,
Yeah.
and definitely not on a Friday the 13th. I wouldn't think, but what do I know? Not a day I would make it. All right, so next meeting is currently scheduled for the 18th. We'll get you the tri-board meeting, and I'm going to start looking at dates to schedule meetings in January, February, March, see if we can get that stuff on the books, rooms reserved, and all that stuff, so everybody can have it. Any other business that anybody has?
You said the next one's at the town hall, right?
Yes, the next one is in the select board meeting room at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, December 18th. Be there or be square. Wow, I'm really dating myself now. Yeah, okay. Well, then, the next item on the agenda is to adjourn, so if I could have a motion for that, I would appreciate it. Second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Keith, seconded by, we'll go with Chris at 7:52. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.